You have seen it all over YouTube. $50,000 in SCHD will surpass your full-time job. You only need $100K in SCHD to retire. SCHD this, SCHD that, blah, blah, blah. SCHD is touted as an amazing retirement fund, but many of these videos are just plain lying to you and are very misleading. And I'll be showing you why this video, $50,000 in SCHD ETF will surpass your full-time job, is a lie, and it's not anywhere enough despite SCHD being a solid dividend fund. This video is from 7-Figure Dividends, and I'll show you why it is a lie. You need to adjust your expectations for retirement if you're expecting SCHD to save it for you. As usual, none of this is financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor.
Knowledge.
If you don't know what SCHD is, where have you been? It's literally been on every investing channel for the past 2 years. Go watch one of those videos and figure it out. All you need to know is this is a Charles Schwab dividend ETF, and it's pretty solid, and you get about a 3 to 4% annual yield every year. But we are here to examine if $50,000 in SCHD is all you really need to surpass your full-time income. So let's jump ahead to 7-Figure Dividends video, as he takes forever to get to the point, so we're just going to start at about 6 minutes into the video where he explains how this will actually work with the dividend and how it will surpass your full-time job.
Now that being said, if we were to go into this dividend calculator and type in $50,000 of initial principal. So in theory, this is if an investor was to invest $50,000 into SCHD early-ish on in their investing career. With SCHD having a starting dividend yield of around 3.49%, an annual dividend amount increase of around 8%, which again, this could be higher or lower, of course. An expected annual share price appreciation at around 4%. Dividend reinvestment turned on, which means all the dividends are once again going to be reinvested. And 30 years invested. Let's see exactly what we get. So for the first year of investing, this investor would have $50,000 in theory invested into the SCHD ETF, earning around $1,767 of annual dividends right off the bat. With no more money contributed, just again reinvesting all the dividends, this investor would have $53,000 of principal
Okay,
in 9 years of investment.
Blah, 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 blah. Okay, year 15,
By year number 12,
year 20, here we go.
By year number 25, $381,000 and $34,000 a year in dividends. And by year number 30, if this investor just invested $50,000, never added another penny to this portfolio, just let the dividends do their thing, this investor in theory would have $678,000 invested into SCHD and over $73,000 a year in dividends. So
$73,000 a year in dividends from $678,000 invested with a 10% annual yield. Now we need to examine the initial claim of the channel. Let's go back to the beginning. If you look what the creator puts in it, he puts an 8% annual dividend amount increase with a 4% annual expected share price appreciation. And this is something we should examine closely. Why does this video assume SCHD will only appreciate 4% per year while the dividend will increase 8% per year? Because it looks good on video. That's why. What happens when the dividend growth outpaces the share price growth? You get a larger and larger dividend every year, which we can see in the video. Towards the end, you're getting like a 10% dividend yield. Let's keep going. There we go. Towards the end, you're getting a 10% dividend yield, over a 10% dividend yield. Who in their right mind thinks SCHD's dividend is going to grow to a 10% yield? If we look at the typical yield, we can see this is not the case. What is it typically? Just a little over 4% to 3%. We've had 12 years of price history, and we can see 3.38, 3.5, 3.85, 3.63, 3.21, 3.64. It's typically between 4 and 3%. We have 12 years of price history for the year-end yield on SCHD, which is typically between 3 and 4%. Yes, the dividend does increase every single year, but does not outpace the share price by 4%. It does not outpace it that much. It's not a 8% increase with only a 4% increase in share price. That is really stupid. If we look at SCHD's historical price without dividends reinvested over the past 12 years, let's see the annual growth rate. We can see it's 9.3%, the compound annual growth rate. It's not 4%, nowhere near that. Now, you would think if we put a 9.3% annual share price appreciation, it would be better, but it's actually the opposite effect. What if on the calculator we match the share price appreciation to the dividend increase? So I pulled up the calculator right here, and we got to change all this to his settings. So we have $50,000, nothing, yeah, 3.3, 3.49. And then let's do with this 8% and 8% and 30 years. Then we'll do a historical measure. When we have an 8% increase, you can see the principal is much larger, but your annual dividend is much smaller because it keeps the yield the same. The yield stays in between 4 and 3%, which we have seen historically. It doesn't grow to a 10% yield. So that's a big deal. So why don't we do a historical measure? We know it's about 9.3% for a compound annual growth rate without dividends. So if our share price is 9.3, we know we need to match it to keep it the same annual dividend yield. So let's calculate, scroll down. We can see we almost have $1.5 million with $51,000 worth of dividends every year. Now, that's a 20K difference, but we can see by the end of the video right here how he has 73,000 invested, a lower principal, but a higher yield. And you may be wondering, John, you have more money. In your example, was a lower yield, but you have more money in total, right? It's 20K difference, but you have more money because of the principal. But I'm going to show you why this is very misleading, and it's actually a big deal when you look at it closely. Remember, the dividend amount increase is not going to outpace the share price appreciation, and we've seen that historically, which is what the video assumes. But the thing we have to consider is in 30 years, what's going to eat this away? Inflation, that's right. So we got to go to our inflation calculator and see how this affects it. So I already got the number in here. But if this is going to be in 2054, if that's 30 years from now, as in 2024, right now, let's go. What will that be worth in 2024? It's going to be worth $24,000. Now, that's still a good amount of change, but that's definitely not replacing my full-time income. It might help in retirement, but $24,000 is not going to cut it for me for yearly expenses, especially in my retirement if I want to travel and do fun things. And this is assuming an average inflation rate of only minus 2.5% every year, which it could be more. Who knows? We've seen some interesting things this year. So in summary, the first video is very misleading because it assumes the annual dividend growth will grossly outpace the stock appreciation, which historically has not been true. And even from an investing standpoint, it doesn't make sense. And then the video does not include inflation. If we actually see the compound annual growth rate, inflation adjusted is 6.53%. So it's not going to be that 9% we even put in the calculator. So can $50,000 in SCHD surpass your full-time job? If you only make $24K a year, I guess, yeah, it can, but I'm hoping you're making more than $24K a year. Yes, you will have a lot in principal, but you'll have to sell some of that principal if you need more than $24,000 per year, defeating the purpose of dividends, because I know most of you want to drip it and get the large dividends. So it doesn't really work in my mind. So there must be a better way to do this instead of going all in SCHD right now if you want to live in dividends. And this is just my personal opinion, not financial advice. I think it'd make more sense to do something with a different investment vehicle like SPY or QQQ. And we can definitely see how your investments would have turned out even if we reinvest dividends as we see right here. If we look at a portfolio growth from 2012, if you had QQQ, you would have doubled your SCHD portfolio almost, and SPY would have outpaced it by $20,000. So for me, it makes more sense to focus on growth, get more risk, but also make more money. And then you can put that money into SCHD for the dividends. Instead of actually taking the slow path to retirement with SCHD, it's going to take twice as long. You can see that with QQQ with its historical performance. Now, SCHD will have a better max drawdown. It's only 21% versus QQQ, which is 32% since 2012, right? But if you want SCHD, if you need to be more conservative, definitely take it. But for me, I'm young. I can take more risk. That's why I'm like really heavy into crypto and Bitcoin right now, considering the season, right? So I can have more volatility in my portfolio and not worry about this max drawdowns as much. And then when it's time to actually retire, it'd make more sense to go into SCHD then instead of now and having half the portfolio I could have had, right? $210,000 for SCHD, $409 in QQQ over the past 12 years. That's a big difference. And like if I don't really like trading in my older years, then I can just plop it all into SCHD. So overall, don't believe the lies, guys. These videos are just silly, just clickbaity. You'll need more than $50,000 to replace your full-time income, even if you put it in SCHD today. But if you want to learn how to retire trading options easily, check out this video right here. Peace.